get this party started. Welcome to the new week of the Bonnet Chronicles. It is Friday, April 30th, 2021, and I am your hostess with the mostest, Kalari Gamer Chick. I'm going to jump right on to the topic because it has been a doozy of a week. I have seen way too many people, especially people with BLM in their profile and saying things like SOS and resist. Hey, sweetie. Axiom's in the chat, y'all. But get back to it. Too many of y'all who claim to be allies, who love to tell people like me you're my ally, having really seriously ridiculous takes on historical things that have happened to my ancestors that were done more than likely by your ancestors. So we are going to tackle a lot of that tonight because I woke up one morning. I think it was Wednesday. Yeah, it was definitely a Wednesday morning. And it's one of the early days as it is for my house because my son has speech therapy. And I watched people up in arms about a tweet. And of course, it's Twitter. So, we're going to get up in arms about whatever we're outraged. It's kind of like the thing to do on Twitter. But they had a reason to be outraged. And when I read the tweet, and it wasn't this asinine thing from Matt Walsh that I have highlighted, I'm going to get to that one soon. It was a lady who, after she said what she said, claimed to be canceled for it. And we're going to talk once again about cancel versus accountability, because some of y'all keep getting words twisted, and I'm not going to let you do that. But her whole message was, well, there were decent slave owners, but slavery was bad. Because she had to add that at the end, but slavery was bad. And her response to the whole thing, words are not that hard, dear. They're not. We're writers. Words aren't that hard. But her whole response from that, it was bad enough. One of my friends on social media, and a really dear person, not Captain America, Chris Evans, shared Chelsea Handler's video of where she interviewed a bunch of people from the South. I think it was Florida. They kind of look Floridian. I don't care if you're at me. Florida has a look. You know it. I know it. I live there. And they had some asinine takes about slavery being behind states' rights. No, it wasn't. How black people, were happier being in servitude and bondage, and how the North had slaves. There was a lot of really hit or miss, a lot more mistakes on what it was like for those who were enslaved. And a lot of people, when you share clips like that, are going to share their hot takes. And this lady decided that her hot take would be, well, there were some decent slave owners. And she wasn't the only one. If it was one person, I probably wouldn't have devoted a cast to this, even though I love history and I love talking about history. But I was just so incensed that then another person who happens to be a professor decided to chime in with her more supposedly innocent take on the topic. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't care if Frederick Douglass gave props to his slave owner's wife for teaching him how to read and write. I don't care if one out of every other of the family members didn't want to rape or beat or whip. They allowed an institution that took my ancestors, told us we weren't humans, were having us work for life, breeding us, taking our babies, making them breed on other plantations so that y'all could be wealthy. So there is no way to spin this for somebody that was involved in the slave process at all in being decent. When you really look at the true history of chattel slavery, and not just in the United States, because a lot of people love to bring that up too. No one's saying it was just in the United States. It's just we decided to be number one, like we are with criminal incarceration, like we are with gun ownership, and being the most terrible with dehumanizing people. Our slave and Jim Crow system was so ridiculous that it inspired Adolf Hitler, and that is not hyperbole. They have it on record that he was inspired by the way Americans treated blacks in the country. Okay? So let's get it clear. If you're coming to anybody with a place of there were decent people involved in the slave trade, I'm shutting you down, and I have no respect for anything else you say. Because you see things from your point of view, which is more than likely somebody who has generationally benefited from the antics of your ancestors. Whether you have old money, whether you're middle of the road, the prejudiceness and the fucking foundations financially that America has is off the backs and blood of my people. And it's funny how so many people have this idea that black people are just lazy and trifling and all that stuff, but you fucking brought us over here. You forcefully made us American, and now you can't stand the fact that you can't whip, beat, rape, and tell us what to do for the rest of our lives. And it's fairly clear that that is the issue that a lot of these people seem to have. They seem to think that we would have been happier still in the fields picking cotton, not getting educated. They think we can't strive for those things. They treat us differently in medicine. They treat us differently with justice, if you can even call it that. The fact that a man in North Carolina was fucking executed and a judge can summarily say, we're not going to release the body cam because it would be prejudicial to the officers involved. No. People deserve to see what the family saw. The family has told us it was an execution. The man's hands were on the steering wheel. He was doing what he was told, and they shot him in the back of the head 4 times. Just like poor Michaela, who died last week. We seem to be unworthy of due process. And that stems from the chattel slavery that infected our nation, that infected the Caribbean, because a lot of people like to forget that black people aren't just an American implant, and we're not just on the continent of Africa that has several different countries. Y'all learn geography. But all over South America, all over the Caribbean, there is black people who, some were inhabitants already, others were brought over on ships to work plantation to get sugar and tobacco and other products. And it's funny that the people who pushed the narrative that we are so lazy didn't make their wealth off their own work. They made all their wealth off the backs, the blood, and the progress that we had from slave labor. We have a project, the 1619 Project, which I have highlighted, that the New York Times, which you know me, I'm not a fan, I've tweeted it out. I don't like that shit rag. I have my reasons. But they did a project about 2 years ago, highlighting different historians, especially black historians' take on how slavery not only shaped this nation, but how it still negatively impacts our country. And of course, a lot of white historians, and I should call them hysterians, but historians took umbrage to this because they don't like the whole notion of the ideology of American exceptionalism and, oh, there were definitely good ones being completely shaken and taken from them. We have given ourselves this mythology that America was just this empty, barren land that was conquered by people looking for religious freedom, which was the bullshit they tried to feed us in elementary school. Oh, the Pilgrims were just looking for religious freedom, and that's why they came over here. They don't tell you that there were slave ships over here before the Pilgrims that helped the Pilgrims get it settled. Then you've got other people. Hey, Jones. Exactly. It was. Exactly. Being a New Yorker, we know that. There are literal slave auction sites that were preserved for historical purposes in New York. The Dutch are notoriously bad. Just the history of the Dutch colonial barbarisms, I could spend hours. I watched a thing on one that I think it was Leopold the other night that was just like, I know America's bad, but they're not the only ones. But people, they just don't want to believe that America didn't start with the Mayflower. And I need y'all to learn some real history. I just don't understand in our day and age, this digital world where knowledge is literally at your fingertips, that people are still buying the bullshit myths that keep being perpetrated. And it's perpetrated in schools. That bothers me. That bothers me that schools are still teaching curriculum that America was empty, which it wasn't. We had several native tribes. We had the cultures that got steamrolled over literally by these invaders. The fact that they have monuments and cities with 20,000 strong. A lot of our democracy and foundations of our Congress were taken from our native citizens. But people want to act like America didn't start until the fucking Mayflower. What is that? And it is. The whole thing of capitalism was started from that. They would not have had their wealth if they did not have the free labor of slaves that they stole from another continent, forced onto the land, bred, spread, and made sure that they worked until they were dead. And I didn't mean to Dr. Seuss that, but for real, it just rolls because it's the way this country built its foundations. From our old Ivy League colleges, all of them have slave ties, to our banks, to our insurance and investment companies. Every single old money family in our country has ties to it. Welcome to the chat, Brandon. I'm glad you made it. It is just very frustrating. And I know it wasn't just rape and murder, Jones, but I need people to understand that when they come at me about decent slave owners, they ignore that even if they weren't the ones doing the most brutal acts, they turned a blind eye to those because it was still filling their pockets. And we see this still being played. We see people so willing to protect their status quo that they rally against anybody getting equality. They don't want equality because they feel like equality will somehow take from them. They don't understand that equal means everybody gets their share. Everybody has a place. No, they want this constant state of divide because they want their share to be bigger. They want their share to be more. It's how they feel more important. And it's exhausting. But what I did not want people to continue to do is to rewrite history, to pat their ancestors on the back. Because I know that's where that I'm being canceled lady was coming from. I know that's where idiots like Matt Walsh are coming from, talking about worth remembering that slavery existed in North America before the white man showed up. Yeah, perpetrated by the white man as well. That slavery was totally ubiquitous amongst Indian tribes. In Mesoamerica, they often use slaves as fodder for human sacrifice. And it's like, okay, as somebody who studied archaeology and history, there's so many things to unpack about how wrong that idiot is. Mr. Pay Your Child Support, Matt Walsh, pay your child support. The fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter who did slavery first. It doesn't matter who did slavery the best. Slavery was still a bad thing. So if your gotcha is, well, it happened before white people, you're not making the point you think you're making. But on top of that, likening human sacrifice, which a lot of archaeological studies have shown that plenty of people within the tribe's culture were willing to be sacrificed because they wanted to appease the gods. But you can't explain that to somebody who doesn't have ties to tribal life in the first place. And yes, there are tribes, especially here in South America, overseas, that did engage in warfare where they sacrificed their enemies. But to act like that was the only way ritual sacrifices happen is disingenuous and not statistically factual. They were even sacrificing their own children. Is it barbaric bystanders? Of course. But we didn't live back then. So I'm going to need people who don't bother to study all the history and just want a racist ass talking point to keep that in mind. You're going to bring up sacrifices and all that stuff. Explain to me how your ancestors used black babies as gator bait. What were they sacrificing them for? Because there was no gods to appease when you did that shit at all. I am just so, and welcome to the chat, Templeton Zarat. The whole issue, and I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm going to make that clear. I'm not anti-capitalism because I realize that we are a system of money rules everything. I don't personally like it, but I realize to exist, you have to have capital. That's just, until that system changes to one that works for everybody, that's the way it is. What I am is I'm anti people using capital to hold others back, to stymie education, to say only a certain demographic is allowed the full freedom towards success and power. And that is how it's been for far too long, especially in our country. And the people who are holding on to power with death grip and cult-like mentality are so afraid of losing their slice of the pie. And they have foot soldiers and scapegoats in their poorer brethren who just believe that having a certain skin tone makes them better. It doesn't even matter if their lives are better. And they're being used as nothing but scapegoats and foot soldiers for these richer assholes' fuckery, which always bothered me. It's like, you're not living in a fancy house. You are not storming the Capitol because you can't even afford to get to DC. Yet every person who wants to shift the narrative wants to blame the poor redneck for what happened on January 6th. Stop being these rich fucker scapegoats. What has being racist done for you? What has it gotten you in this life? All you do is you stay mad and angry and hateful. It hasn't raised your lot in life. It hasn't given you any success. All it's given you is more anger and more people to be angry with. But it's not giving you any kind of progress. It is not fulfilling to spend your life denying other people their humanity, and you can't convince me of it. And it ages you. Have you ever really looked at some of the more hateful, vocal people? Going back to Florida, some of the most wildest videos we see out there of people flipping out in racist fashion have been from the Florida types. And age hates you. It is like sift hate. It, for real, I have not seen a bigot that didn't look like they were Emperor Palpatine. And there's a reason for it. It takes a lot more energy to wrap and twist your brain around looking at a fellow human being as, you're different, I have to dislike you. It takes nothing to mind your business. It takes nothing to find something you like in life and be happy. It literally enriches your life to learn. But you've convinced so many people, not just in our nation, but all around, that their identity, their worth, their self-respect, their lot in life is based on being better than other people, based on trivial things. And until we get away from that, we aren't going to have any better. And then you've got morons, once again, like that Matt Walsh idiot, who they profit off of people's ignorance. You know how many people will go around spreading his garbage because they seem to think that that's the way it is. That's the way it should be. And you know what? It's not right. It's not right that people with platforms, people like Matt Walsh, people like Charlie Kirk, people at the Federalist, take the time to spread these kinds of misinformation and talking points that keep us divided and dumb over pushing for real information and unity. It doesn't make sense in this day and age. There's literally no reason at all for people to still be spiteful and hateful in this day and age, save we have a disconnect. And it starts when we stop allowing schools to teach garbage as history, because there's way too many lies being pushed to our kids early on about how America was founded, brutal stuff. There is so many things that have happened in our country that outrage people because they find out well after it happens on like an HBO series. I knew about the Tulsa race massacre. I don't like when they call massacres riots because it wasn't a riot. Tulsa was a thriving, successful, black-driven area. And because the whites in that area did not like the fact that it was a successful area, they murdered and burnt the town down. It happened again in North Carolina. It happened again in Rosewood, Florida. It happened as not even that far back with the MOVE movement in Philadelphia in the 80s. And they still have the children's bones in the museum, and they justify it. The lady who's in charge justifies it because some asinine excuse about reaching out to the people's family but not getting the proper whatever. They use us as relics. They used our ancestors as free labor, and they don't care if the cops murder us. That is what idolizing and downplaying the historic brutality has led us to where somebody can say, well, slavery was bad, but there was decent slave owners. No, there wasn't. And there wasn't decent slave owners' wives. I don't care if they helped a few learn stuff. Slavery, no matter who did it, was abhorrent. So much so that some of y'all love to try to claim that there were white slaves in this country because you don't understand the difference between a slave and an indentured servant. Indentured servants were treated harsh depending on who they worked for, but they were workers. They earned passage over here, and they could be free after their contract was done. Chattel slaves did not get freedom, save death. You were a slave for life until the Emancipation Proclamation. I tell people this all the time because I'm not afraid to push back anybody that pushes that myth that there were Irish slaves. Now, the Irish in our country, before they were allowed to be called white, were treated like shit. Historically, them and the Italians were treated like shit. And then they got that supposed societal bump up, and they were like, you know what? We're white now. We don't really have to worry about our civil rights anymore. We're one of y'all. There were literal mafia guys. And this is the brilliant thing about history. This is why I wish more people were in the history, that were going down to Mississippi to help with the murder of the three men in Mississippi. The murders of the men that inspired Mississippi burning. The mafia actually were undercover working with civil rights people to make sure that the Ku Klux Klan didn't bring this shit too far north. But people don't get to learn stuff like this because we're too busy still pushing the bullshit narratives of heroizing men who put America's citizens in internment camps like FDR, who as a child, I was taught to idolize that dude, because they made him seem like this hero who, became president despite polio. We didn't get to learn until college about the internment camps and some of the decisions he made, including siding with Stalin, who was one of the worst murderers that history tends to like to downplay. The man murdered millions. He was not a good leader. And our country were buddies with him. And we did a lot of other bad things, including bringing some of those Nazis over that we should have all hung. But people just don't want to learn, and we don't push our education to teach these things. And it's the shame of it. Yeah, Brandon, it's hard. There's a lot of censorship as well. There's a lot of things that you can find online, but there's a lot of things that people fight to not have shared. And it's the shame of it all is the history's there. You can only hide it so much. As long as there's a relic, as long as there's something written, and now in our day, everything is documented. People are going to look back on this 100 years from now, seeing cops executing citizens in their cars, in their yards, kneeling on their necks, and wonder, what the fuck, America? And you're not going to be able to spin this the way we've spent history these last few centuries about exceptionalism and heroism. We need more truth. We need more fact. Because we have way too many people trying to say that the Civil War was fought for states' rights when it was fought for slavery. The whole Articles of the Confederation make it clear what it was about. And you still allow people to put statues up of traitors, to hang flags of a country that they wanted their own America. That was what the Confederate flag was about. It's not a symbol of rebellion. It's a symbol of treason. It is why they flew that shit on January 6th. And it boggles my mind that people don't understand that. That's another thing that people don't understand as well, Jones. Historically, Black people that have direct ties to this country have different DNA. We have the DNA of the Africans that were more than likely brought over here. We have, in my case, Native DNA. They took my grandfather from his tribe, re-educated him in a white Christian home. Then he got disowned from marrying my Black grandmother, whose family escaped from the South. Rich enough history, but tragic. My bloodline is probably fully mixed up from French, from what my grandmother told me, Native Iroquois, obviously Black, which is what I claim more than anything, because even with the direct ties to my great-grandfather, you can't claim tribe association unless they accept you. So that's another thing that you have to deal with, being Black American in a lot of our scenarios. Having no ties, but all the ties. No real claim, so you make your own. I said it the other day. Being Black in this world, but especially in America, is not for the weak. Because you've got constant people trying to tell you how to be Black, the proper way to be Black. Be Black this way, be Black that way. They want to own us or tell us how to be. You can only be Black your way. You can only be you. And I don't want to see any more Black people breaking themselves to be whatever fucked up stereotype they have of how we're supposed to live our lives. If you're a Black nerd who likes anime, you do you. If you're a gothic rocker chick, if you're a down home, down in the country type that loves country music and monster trucks, you do you. There is no proper way to be a Black person. And yeah, I like to call out coons. There's a difference to me when I call somebody a coon than it is to making fun of somebody that doesn't fit the Black stereotype, which we shouldn't be pushing Black stereotypes anymore. We're human beings. To me, somebody who I've called a coon is like Tim Scott, who can know the pain of being singled out because of his color, and then get on and not only give that orange asshole credit for all the work that the Biden administration has currently been doing in the last 100 days, but to fix his ugly ass mush mouth to say that there's no racism in America. You realize you said that on the heels of 4 people of color, and mostly black, including children, being murdered by the police, but there's no racism in America, Tim? Are you kidding me? And it really doesn't help that he looks like the character Mushmouth from Fat Albert, like at all. Like somebody put his picture up next to Mushmouth, and I was done for the day. Took me out. But we've had people like him from the get. People who just want that proximity to whiteness, and it's a struggle. I grew up on Staten Island. I don't know if some of y'all understand that borough. I'm pretty sure Jones does. I call it the racist borough of New York. It is a mismatch of different ethnicities. It is where Wu-Tang got its start. But there are certain places in Staten Island that are hella racist, and they know. I went to a legitimate, almost all-white high school in Staten Island because of the income my family made. I was the black friend. I look back on that life now, and I do not like it. I would never want that for my child, and I would never want to go back to that. In fact, I said it a couple of casts ago when they invited me to the school's 25th reunion, I think it was. I turned it down. I didn't want to go. This was on the heels of what happened in Ferguson, where some of them decided to call black people savages, but oh no, Tim, you're our friend. You're one of the good ones. No, you see, I got to the age where I realized I don't want to be a good one. I don't want your pats on the head, and I don't think proximity to you via friendship or anything else is going to make me a better person. I'm better without you. That's why you're seeking me out to hang out with. I wasn't looking for any of y'all. And once I realized that, oh yeah, exactly, Jones. I heard about that nonsense too. And they have come out full face racism against wearing masks, against doing anything they're supposed to do with the pandemic. And it is ridiculous. And it was like that when Dinkins won mayor. Some of the most racist, disgusting things I heard about Mayor Dinkins was in my hometown. And don't even get me started on the Central Park 5. Because even if we had the information that we know now about what they did to those children back then, there were way too many people that were willing to see children hang for a crime they didn't commit, including that orange orangutan who should really be sitting in jail himself. Not just for inspiring what happened on January 6th. And I am not going to stop driving that home because we have not had accountability. I really don't like Pat, so he's not lying, y'all. But I get so tired of seeing people calling accountability cancel culture. And it wasn't just that lady with there was benevolent slave owner takes. There have been a lot of people in entertainment, in politics, and just your every average day wannabe Twitter famous types that go out of their way to say harmful, hateful things, go out of their way to say bigoted things, go out of their way to mock and harm people. And then when people push back and say, we don't want to support you, you're going to lose your job, you're not going to be a star, you're not going to get this and that, they want to lament cancel culture. It's called consequence. We all have a brain in our head. There have been times, especially growing up in the 90s, where you might have laughed at something that you look at now like, man, that wasn't funny, that was insensitive. I think about all the gay and lesbian and trans jokes that used to be the norm that don't strike a chord with me anymore except disgust. But you gotta get to that point. And everybody messes up in life. But when you don't want to realize that you're dehumanizing others, when you don't want to realize maybe you can make a point without being ableist or bigoted or misogynistic, and way too many people want to just take that easy path of being bitter and hateful. And they don't want to feel consequence for it. They want to call somebody the N word. They want to slut shame or fat shame or any kind of shame. They want to act like they could say horrible things, but turn it around on them. They can't take it. And it's always the people that try to dish it out the hardest that can't take it back. They are the most fragile, yet they call us the snowflakes. It never freaking ceases to amaze me, those types. All that mouth about, oh, this person's beneath me, you're this or that. The moment you call them a racist, it is like you slapped their mama. They get all up in arms. And then you've got the people who claim that they're not openly racist, and they tend to be the worst to me right now because they're constantly in our mentions, in our face, holding conversations we didn't ask for about how it's not them or not all. And let me make this clear. If you're not saying racial words, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, good for you. I don't have kudos or a cookie for you for doing bare minimum, no. And I did not ask for your resume. I do not care how long you've been fighting the good fight or putting BLM in your Twitter profile. The moment you jump into a conversation about racism to make sure that we know that not all or not you, you're not an ally. And I know a lot of people don't like hearing that because they really pump themselves up to think that I'm doing this. You should look at me. That's not the point of being an ally. If you are saying Black Lives Matter only to get those hearts and pats on the head, you're in it for the wrong reasons. You should believe Black Lives Matter whether somebody's watching you or not, whether you have 20,000 followers or none. But some of y'all like to play games. And like I said, I've had way too many men and women of a certain demographic decide that whenever I talk about racism or any kind of hate, that they have to get on and defend. And when I point blank ask them, are you the one doing it? Did I call you by your name and say, hey, you, Joe such and such, I think you're racist? No, I didn't, did I? I was talking about in general, but you felt targeted. Work on your defense because a hit dog will holler. I love that statement. My grandmother used to use that. And my other favorite is I ain't got a dime in this quarter, which I use a lot as well. But the hit dog will holler will always ring true because it doesn't matter what we are talking about online. There is always some white person that decides they are going to make it their job to come in and be the defenders of the not all. And it's like there's enough. And that is the problem. Too many of you don't see that there is way too many that are comfortable, if not gleefully okay, with embracing hate, with oppressing others, with the deaths of our children to legalize lynching. And until you are putting all the energy into fighting that you do and making sure that we know that it's not you and maybe your little knitting circles, you're not the ally you think you are. And if you're calling people pushing back when you say asinine things like there were decent slave owners as being canceled, you were never famous to begin with. I don't know you. I didn't know you until you put out that asinine tweet. So maybe stop thinking you're that important and work on maybe learning a thing or two, because it really is getting tiring seeing average ass people talking about how they're being canceled. You never were. How can we cancel something we weren't into? Make that make sense. I just don't understand that. Exactly. Brandon, that is an amazing saying. Guilty conscience needs no accuser. Exactly. And that's what it feels like whenever y'all come out of the woodwork. You don't realize you tell on yourselves when you do that. If I didn't directly tag you in, and I am just talking about white people in general, and I'm saying this as a partner who identifies as Caucasian, he has never once came to me and said, Tin, I feel like you're targeting me. Because he knows that we're close enough to where if I was talking about him, I'd tell him. I have no problem telling people when I have an issue with them. I'd rather people know and be upfront. It's one of the things that I do like about my diagnosis. People get nervous when I talk about sociopathy because you only get the Hollywood version of it. You think sociopathy is just somebody who can kill without remorse. No, a lot of our personality is very direct. If I like a person, you're going to know. I might like you more than what you would think is normal because I like connecting to people. But if I don't like you, I'm not fucking with you. I tell him that all the time. He's had friends that I will not talk to. I just don't want to be bothered. I know how I am. And I would rather not fake the front of even civility because it's a waste of energy for me. I know some people don't understand what that's like. I didn't for the longest time. I got called all kinds of antisocial, or you're bitchy, or you're that. For my brain, it is a waste of time to fake my way through things with people I don't want to bother with. And as a child, being pushed into that over and over exhausted me. I'm not doing that as an adult. So he's had a couple of people that he was friends with, and I say was because he started to realize it ain't worth it, that he knew. I'm not going to bring you around 10. She don't like you. She's not going to pretend. I've got mutual friends like that. One of my closest friends, her ex seems to be in and out of her life. I don't want to mess with him. I don't want to deal with him. He is the type that needs to brag and insert himself into things. I don't like people like that, and I'm not going to pretend like I do. So I've made it clear to her when we all hang out, don't have him around. We won't have a problem. So far, they haven't had him around, so there hasn't been a problem. I don't want to have to fake my way, and I won't do it. So it's a lot easier on all of our nerves just to not put that situation, you know? And exactly, Templeton, if somebody has to tell you they're your ally, when the whole thing of allyism is the people around you know it, and we're the ones that say it, you're not an ally. And a lot of you go into social media, especially, expecting to sledgehammer yourself into conversations. And then when you're wrong and you're called out, you jump to defense. And then you say things like, well, I'm your ally. Okay, what have you done for the cause besides putting that hashtag in your bio? And then even if you've like this one lady, because I had to break it down to her because she was in my mentions talking about, well, I write letters, I get voter things together. And I was like, I have never called you out on the stuff you've done. I have praised you for your ideas of gathering up people so that we could get them to the polls. Why did you choose today? And it was on the day that I attacked the resistance hashtag. She decided to get defensive because she had resisted her profile still. I didn't say her directly. And I know there are good people that use that hashtag because we have led ourselves to believe that the more followers we have on Twitter, the more important our voices. And you all know how I feel about that by now. I really wish you would just have your voice no matter what. But I made it clear. I did not call her out directly. I called out that hashtag because I've seen far more resistance members with shitty takes about cops killing us, shitty takes about the vice president, shitty takes about women, LGBTQ, and everything in general that goes against their whole hashtag. So I was calling out the hashtag resistance, and she jumped into my mentions with her resume again. And my brain was like, why are you doing this? Did I hyper focus on you? Were you feeling defensive this morning? Don't do that. If I do not directly call you out, Feel free to assume that I'm not talking about you. But the moment you come into my mentions after I've made a statement about how a certain group of people are acting to defend yourself, I'm going to think you're not as good as you thought you were, and you feel targeted for a reason. Because if you're busy doing all those things that you had to let me know in resume style, you would have been too busy to argue with me on my tweet about the multitude of people using that hashtag and not doing good. Who literally were justifying the death last week of a 16-year-old child whose family were forcing her to fight adults, whose life was just snuffed out with 4 gunshots to her. And still, some people are like, well, she had a knife. She deserved it. No one deserves to die. Let's get that clear. We have had men mow down people in concerts, churches, movie theaters, and have been taken in alive. So don't give me that bullshit that a 16-year-old girl deserved bullets in her back. Stop it. Enough. And too many of you will have SOS or resist in your bios. And what the heck are you resisting? Decency? Seeing people as humans? What, you don't see color and you don't want to be called out about that too? Because that is bullcrap as well. You don't see color until you're crossing the street because somebody black is near you or in your almost all white neighborhood. You don't see color until you want to point out how exotic we look or how pretty our skin tone is. You can't do that. You can't Richard Attenborough us. Treat us like we're some kind of species to observe and ponder about, but then act like you don't see what makes us supposedly different. I just don't get the mental gymnastics some of y'all engage in to try to do racist things or bigoted things, but not come across as that. Own it or don't. But the half-assers make me the maddest. I don't know if I'm the only one about this. Exactly, Jones. That was another point. But I don't think people quite understand the conundrum that you cause when you half-ass bigotry. You might as well be full bore because yous are the worst. You just want to be liked and adored for not being full racist. But you still allow the system to harm and oppress people. And when you get called out on it, you get mad because you don't want to be likened to the people who are very loud and proud racist. But you're A-okay with what they're doing to us. So I say, either you're going to go full anti-racist, anti-bigotry, actually, because it's not just racism that really needs to be stamped out by our species, or you're just going to embrace the other side. But you middle of the road types get on my nerves, and I don't get exhausted calling you out. I enjoy it because I like seeing you sputter. You don't have any excuse for the way you are. You can't have it both ways. You can't say you're for justice and equality and you want Black lives to matter in one breath, but you don't want to confront the things that you've believed in about Black people. You don't want to live in a neighborhood that's actually diverse. You don't want your kids going to certain schools. You don't want them dating certain people. So you're not as progressive as you think you are. You're still making excuses like, oh, it was economic anxiety that caused the Capitol. No. Let's get things straight towards the end of this cast. We're going to stop that narrative that it was poor redneck Jeffros that was storming our Capitol. I know some of them look bummy with their pro-Auschwitz shirts. But these were people that could afford private jets. Dude was owning a fucking Louisiana grocery store. A lady that owned a chain of salons are amongst the arrestees. Yeah, there were a couple of Florida men who didn't have jobs, whose wives had very lucrative jobs, basically house husbands. These were people with means. And the problem with racism is it's always shifted off to the poor. Oh, it's just economic anxiety that caused these people. No, these are well-educated people who know that if the status quo changes, their piece of the pie gets smaller and they don't want that. And they have pushed that narrative that is just the poor people who, there are a lot of y'all that act like foot soldiers to these assholes who will never get to live like they do, like I said earlier in the cast. But there are far more people, especially my age, that went to school, that knew better, that had a black friend, who still say the most violently, abhorrently racist things now, especially in Staten Island. Come at me, I dare you. I just need people to understand that racism is a sickness and nobody's 100% immune. Whether it manifests itself into self-hate or hating of others, it is a toxin and it requires constant purging of your system, of feeling hatred towards somebody because you don't understand them, feeling jealous of people because they have something you don't, when it shouldn't matter. Focus on you and the things around you that make you happy and grow from that. Life isn't that complicated, but we make it that way. And it's because we allow these toxins to get into us and push us towards these attitudes of, well, if our neighborhoods integrate, it won't be safer. Why do you think that? Why would you think that a black family wouldn't want to keep their neighborhood nice, to keep their children safe? I lived in a damn good neighborhood in Staten Island. I lived in a nice house with my grandparents before my mom decided that she didn't want to live like that anymore. And that's a whole nother story. But growing up, my elementary school life especially, I lived in a very nice neighborhood, a very integrated neighborhood. Racism is a learned condition. When your neighbors are Asian American, Pakistani American, Polish American, when you grow up in a literal melting pot, you don't learn to hate your neighbor because they're different. You don't learn that their diets are wrong. You don't learn that their clothing. I went to school in a kimono because our Japanese neighbors were like our best friends. So I need people to understand that you don't have to be hateful. You choose to be. And we need to stop acting like there's no hate in our hearts at all. Because that's a great way to stay hateful, is to pretend like it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. Because it's literally stuffing out life. It's keeping us stagnant. I was told as a child, and plenty of us were, that by this time in our lives, this was a future to us. 2021, we were supposed to be exploring space by now. We were supposed to be living in places in the sky with robotics and tech that were mind-blowing. And while the tech age truly exploded, because I remember when 8-tracks were the cutting age, we are in a stagnation period because there are too many people still willing to fight each other over the most stupid, insignificant differences than to work together as a species to make better for everybody. And it boggles my mind. It boggles my mind how we still, as a society, allow ourselves to differentiate and fight amongst each other over stupid shit when we should be in a better position. Exactly. 8-tracks. I'm not joking. My first video game, for those of you who don't know, I'm a gamer. That's what the GXC is for. Was Pong on the Atari. My dad had the Atari. That, Donkey Kong, and Popeye were my 3 favorite games. That was my first gaming system. His, I think it was a Buick. I'm trying to remember what car it was. Had an 8-track deck. My grandmother had this monster system that had both the turntables for 45 and LP, 8-track, and cassette. It was a freaking monster. It took up like a full wall of her house. I'm telling you, technology has come a long way. All the stuff that this can do, we had a whole house full of stuff that did it. Exactly. Space Invaders, Mystical. There was just the tech boom is real. Because we legit, if I remembered my first computer, because it was a Commodore 64, my own personal computer, that is, versus what I have today, which is what I'm broadcasting to you guys on, a Dell G3, Littleton would have freaking went nuts over this system. I was a tech head as a child. I was a gamer as a child. But we didn't have the technology that we have today. So I'm not acting like we didn't make a big leap. I'm just imagining where we would have been had we all just gotten over this, oh, your gender or your color or your size, whatever stupid superficial thing we keep trying to find to fight with on each other. If we got rid of that and actually worked together on things, where our species would be right now. And it makes me mad. It breaks my heart because we have such brilliant minds that aren't being nurtured and nourished. We have so many things left unexplored, unchecked, unlearned, and we are still too busy fighting wars against each other over land, over resources, over looks, over ideologies. Make it make sense, because I can't. My brain has not found a logical or even rational reason why our species can't get our shit together at all. It makes no sense. That temporary satisfaction you might think you have, allegedly being better than some people, obviously doesn't work. Some of the most miserable people I've seen supposedly had it all. All these so-called wealthy socialites that party themselves to death or take their own lives when they realize that it fucking doesn't matter, because they spent all their lives seeking praise of others so badly that they can't even take a little criticism without it being the end of the world. That is the twisted society we keep upraising, telling people they need to strive to just be wealthy and flaunt it. For what? And then on top of that, the people that tell you that you can be hateful and not like this group because you don't understand this group, and somehow that'll make you a better person, and when you die, you'll get into this great magical place. Let me tell you something. You're using religion to spread bigotry. I really hope you're in for a surprise when you meet your maker, because I don't think that was in their plan. I'm just saying. I don't think it was in the plan to be hateful and spread hate and be a miserable person your entire life, which is supposed to be a gift. Life is our gift. And you squandered it being a disgusting person. And then you think somehow, despite that, you're going to have a good afterlife. Good luck with that. I don't know how that works. Like I said, doesn't make logical sense to me. And exactly, when you are happy with who you are, you really don't. And it doesn't matter. Hey, Silent, how you doing? I hope you're doing well. But for real, when you are happy with who you are, when you're happy with the people around you, you want other people to feel that way. I tell people all the time, I don't think of myself as a good person. I'm not saying that to knock myself down. I'm being honest. If I have to make a cutthroat decision, I will make it, especially if it's logical. I've always considered myself more of a chaotic neutral. And I know people laugh at that. I'm not good. I'm not bad. I truly am in between. I was raised by people who portrayed themselves as good and did bad things. And I was raised by people who did some bad things that actually did good. So I have seen things that have shaped my mentality. I'm not afraid to, you stop it, Axio, to be upfront about that. But the thing that I realize in my life, that I'm happier when I am making people happy. And for a lot of people, it doesn't take much. Just being able to talk to somebody. When my friends need to just vent or reach out, I want them to know they have that. When somebody needs that compliment, when somebody needs that pick-me-up, I want them to have it. When I have a little extra and I can help, I do things that way. Though I did go off on a certain young man that tried to take advantage of that. Don't do it. My followers are not here for you to fleece. If I don't share your message over and over again, don't spam my DMs for it either. That's going to get you blocked. I don't need followers that badly. But for real, I really think the key to happiness is just making your own life better and being a decent person, because it radiates towards other people. And when you're okay with yourself, things do get better. I honestly really feel like a weird self-help book when I say it, but I'm living proof. I walked away from toxic stuff. I stopped letting the bitterness and depression constantly get to me. And it's not easy because I'm bipolar. So there are going to be days those lows happen. They don't take everything out of me anymore, because I have stuff to live for. I have things that are on the horizon that I want to do. Find your purpose and get away from those toxic, hateful things, and things will get better. And Axiom is going to be fine, y'all. He's going to be living here soon. We're going to look towards the future. I think he just likes to push the whole she's scary thing. I can be, but I'm not with him. He knows he's safe. But I'm going to get ready to it really is silent. It's a shame. I wish I had been this way even 20 years ago, because that was when I was at my lowest, trying to figure out where I wanted to be in this life, trying to figure out who I was in this life. But I'm glad I'm still here. And if you're still here, 38 was when I started to really get it together. And I do not only let you out the stream. This is a man obsessed with our lawn, y'all. So don't let him fool you. He doesn't know. He's not a captive. But I'm gonna get ready to wrap things up. Exactly, Templeton. He's a love prisoner of that, and he's not really a prisoner. He got more freedom than he knows what to do with. But I'm gonna get ready to wrap this up. I really look forward to next week. Honestly, y'all, thank you. I didn't know if starting this up was going to do anything. I'm already at 51 followers. They are looking at me as an affiliate. I don't know whether I'm going to do it or not at this point, because I really don't need it. I plan on doing this show no matter what. But I am grateful for everybody that takes part in the chat, every one of you who have shared the videos and just come in and talk and do the dialogue. It really does help keep me focused and on this path. So we probably would have been BFFs, Capricorn, for real, because you and I think alike in a lot of things. And I think you would have liked 20-year-old 10. I didn't like her much because it was kind of a know-it-all. Not much of a jump, but a little bit more depressed, which sucked. But I really am grateful for all of you. And I really appreciate y'all helping me out by being in the chat, keeping the conversation flowing. And I will be back this time. Well, not this time, because 8 o'clock wraps it up. 7 o'clock next week. Love you all. Have a good night. Oh my God, Axiom, terrible.